Medical innovation starts with medical discussion. Talking about the future and what comes next with Project Medtech.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lindsay Deneen, Director of Marketing and Engagement at Project Medtech, and welcome to another episode of the Project Medtech podcast. If we can help you in any way, or you would like to suggest a future guest, you can email us at info@projectmedtech.com. If conversations like this are helpful, that's exactly why we bring people together at our signature events, the Midwest Showcase, the Startup Symposium, and Coming to America. For more on our events that include networking, education, and pitch competitions for startups, check them out at www.projectmedtech.com. We even have sponsorship options if your company is also dedicated to accelerating medical technology to impact patient lives. So reach out today to get involved. The Project Medtech podcast is proudly sponsored by Ward Law. Ward Law Office, LLC is a boutique law firm specializing in the practice of patent and trademark law. They are committed to providing inventors, entrepreneurs, and businesses of all types with personal and professional services and are flexible to meet your unique needs. It is their goal to both educate on how to secure valuable patent and trademark protection and to provide high-quality services at rates affordable to independent inventors, startups, and small businesses alike.
Today's episode of Project Medtech is brought to you by Wheelhouse DMG, performance marketing for privacy-first industries like medtech and healthcare. Every Wheelhouse client experienced record growth in 2025. That's the result of more than a decade building the data infrastructure, measurement systems, and domain expertise that healthcare and medical device marketing actually requires. Find out how every Wheelhouse client experienced record growth in 2025 at wheelhousedmg.com.
Without further ado, let's dive in.
Okay. Edwin, long time coming. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Been looking forward to it.
Yeah, I got my mug that you gave me. Anyone who's listening in who doesn't follow you on LinkedIn should follow you. They would know that you are the Guinness guy. If it wasn't 9 a.m. where I'm at, I would go get a Guinness from the fridge, pour it properly. Also, it's out of a can, so it just doesn't taste as good as drinking it out of the tap. So anyways, I have the Guinness mug in celebration. But Edwin, an introduction to who you are and your background for the listeners would be great.
So Edwin Lindsay, so I've been in medical devices for about 20 odd years now, covering quality, regulatory and clinical. I've got a consultancy business with over 40 people, but I've worked in a number of I've worked with over now 100 startups with regards to helping them take to market. And that's probably what my passion is, working with startups. That's probably why I'm probably Guinness as well, because working with startups is just a different way of working with a different breed of companies, but it's the most enjoyable part of it all. So to say I've worked with over 100, but I've also got my own medical device company, so I actually can sit on both sides of the fence and understand what's going on, not just from regs and clinical and how we need to be compliant, but actually how do we make money and keep the business going.
I love it. So your expertise is in regulatory and quality. What sparks the interest in getting into regulatory and quality of medical devices?
It's probably I'm too old for that one. Try to think back. I think I fell into it because my degree's in micromolecular biology and started off in Smith and Nephew and thought I was going into a lab, threw me into operations quality, and from there went on to work with a number of other companies that kind of I would say the person who mentored me brought me into the regulatory aspect of it. He was probably one of the people I did look up to, and like Angela, who was my number one first employee. Both of us were trained with the same person and kind of trained us the same way, and we kind of started to enjoy regulatory. He taught us what we need to do, especially with understanding what needs to be done and just kind of helping companies get to market. And just that's the kind of fun of it. Every product we work with is different. It's not the same strategy. It's not the same way going forward. It's kind of that variability with the different devices, etc. And that's probably why I love working with startups and love working with work as a consultant for so many years, is the variability. And the regulations I think the regulations are fairly straightforward. You use the common sense. I'm not the brains behind it. The people who invent the products are. So we're there just to give them, I enjoy just being there as the sounding block person that tries to help them get the product to market. And that's where I enjoy the most.
Yeah. So, there's, for anyone who's listening in, full transparency, Edwin and I are good friends. We got introduced by Mike Cremeans, but we've, feel like we've been all over the world together, and had Guinnesses all over the place. And again, I said, Edwin, post about Guinness, just forewarning that if you are out at an event with Edwin, just be careful, tread lightly on the Guinnesses. But the other thing that and I love Guinness, but the one thing that we also kind of bonded over was maybe, I think we see regulatory and quality in the same way and understand how it fits into the larger puzzle of medical devices. But I think we also see a different way of kind of doing consulting that maybe goes against the typical way. Mm-hmm. And so, without leading too much, I'd love for you to kind of talk about that methodology that I know you and I kind of bonded over the first time we had drinks and dinner, and kind of saw that in the same way.
So before I went into consultancy, I kind of always had a bugbear with when companies I work with bring in consultants who would give you information, but never allow you, never give you the decisions that you need made. We were employing them to help us make decisions, or not just to consult and give us options of maybe yes and maybe no. And as I kind of grew into the industry, you got a lot more feedback from people I got to know that said the exact same thing. Consultants are good, but sometimes they don't give you what you need. So when I went out my own, I kind of set that mindset that I'm going to really start to help it. I really went for the startups because we found out that they need the most help. They don't have anybody there to guide them, but they also need the most help where they need decisions made, because that's what probably kills a lot of startups. And when I spoke to a number of people early on, that's what was killing startups, especially in Scotland where I'm from. But even when I started moving into the US, it was that decision making, that kind of understanding, hands-on approach, like helping inventors, innovators, clinicians who have ideas, who are the brains behind it all, but no idea how to get it to market. And it was that kind of hands-on approach that kind of I looked at and says, right, that's what we need to give them. And it's worked, because I grew from a one-man band from myself into 45 people without a sales team. And most of that was through word of mouth and just kind of recommendations with people saying, look, go use them, because we made sure it was delivered. I think early on when I first came into the device sector, with regards to consultancy, startups, I kind of tried to get a kind of some kind of skin in the game. So I would actually convert some of the invoices into equity. So actually it made me want to take these products to market rather than just invoice, walk away. If it's successful, put the banners out saying, well done. If it didn't, just walk away, I've got my money. So I think that was one of the other reasons I kind of looked at the start was, look, we'll invest in the company, we'll give them hands-on approach, and we'll try and get them there because that's what these innovators are looking for. They want a product to market, they want to be able to start selling it. And it's that understanding of the process. And I even go back to, I still look at it now, there's still a lot of consultants say, well, we need to do a regulatory strategy at first. Like, no, let's look back. Are you going to actually sell this product? Is there a clinical need for this? How are we going to sell it? Regulatory can come afterwards, because that's fairly straightforward. We can work that round if you've got a device that's going to work. And that's where I can see that more and more. That was that hands-on approach rather than just say, right, go in with a tick box mentality. This is what we've always done. This is what we have to do. Whether it made sense to the startup or not, that was where I could see things falling down, and how I set the company up and how it grew to where it was just now. Most of the people who've worked for me have got that same mentality. They come in, we're a hands-on. We're not really a consultancy, we're a service provider. We've always done the hands-on deliverable. We've trained people to be able to do it themselves. And that's worked over the last 20 years. And I think that's probably, everybody's got their own business model, but I've found that that's been the most successful for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think that that's something that we obviously have our event side of our business and podcast side and our consulting side, and that is the one piece that is really evident when you engage with Edwin, which is I think why we got along so well, is that with Project MedTech, our story was, hey, okay, we have all of these things under one roof, so we're going to start you in the right place because we don't. We this is the best area for you to start in. Let's figure out reimbursement and economic story first, and then let's get to the regulatory piece, right? Is there a clinical fit? And then we can figure out regulatory. And when you kind of said that, I was like, oh yeah, I totally agree with you on this. And then I think, but actions speak louder than words as well. And that's the thing is, yes, we have regulatory and quality in-house at Project MedTech, but Edwin and Project MedTech refer a bunch of work back and forth, and even before some are clients, because you understand the value of kind of figuring out that economic value and then figuring out the RAQA on the back end of that and how that fits in. And oftentimes it's a pretty interactive process. And so I totally agree with that. And I think that that's one thing that startups need to make sure that when they engage with consultants, that the consultant isn't just saying, well, of course you need to figure out IP first, or some legal thing, or your QMS, or this. Just think about, is that what's best for the company or not? And are you having those conversations with that consulting group? Because if you are, then they truly understand startups. But if they don't, they're just another piece of work, you know, and that's the danger for startups, especially when you consider, and the one thing you were kind of hitting on, that I'd like you to expand more on is these early stage startups don't need fractional coaches. They need fractional team members. They need someone who's going to get in there and make decisions and do things for them. So maybe talk a little bit about that integration, because you talked about getting in and actually doing stuff. Yeah. But what about just making a decision for them?
Okay, so I think I've seen over the last couple of years, probably just since a couple of years after COVID, the new buzzword fractional support. Yes, probably it's been done, but I've been doing it for 18 years now. That was probably my first job as I went out my own as one of the companies. I walked in as a QRA manager. And that was more just because they couldn't afford to bring people in full time. It was like 8 days a month where they could pay for that through grant funding. So they didn't want to do that. So I've done that for years. There's a number of the people who I've brought into the company that work for me, who are now QARA director, QARA manager, who will sit on their organisation chart from the outside world looking in. They're part of the organisation. From the inside out, they're being invoiced as part of the work. But I think the key part of that is a lot of people are jumping on that bandwagon because they see a lot more companies going that way. But I think that's okay. But a lot of them, some of them don't want to make decisions. They don't want to issue a CAPA, issue a concession, release product. If they have to remember that they are part of that company, not their own company. They are part of that company. That's what they've been employed for. And when they start kind of putting roadblocks up just because they don't want to do it, they might ruin their reputation. Through silly things, just because they don't want to take that risk, but you're looking at it, there's no risk there. So we've been involved with a number of companies where we've taken over from fractional support, where the consultants went in selling that package and they've not made decisions. They've not been responsible for actually acting as the QARA manager and putting blocks on, because one, they might not have known the product, they don't understand the product, they don't understand what's happening. I think what a number of the things I've seen recently is the fractional support where they're not doing the hands-on work. They're actually just getting people to come in and work as it, and they're just there as a figurehead. That's fine if you can get away with it, but these startups don't need that. And one of the other reasons I started the fractional support of it, as I say, about 18 years ago, was working with a number of investors. They didn't want to bring in teams of people building empires, bringing some like a QRA director in who would then potentially say, oh, we need another person to do job X. We need somebody else to do quality. We need somebody else to do clinical. We can start bringing in people and give them I've always said, a one-stop shop where they know what the cost is. There's that overhead, but they're getting it delivered. and they're not building empires just for the sake of building empires. It's actually getting the product to market. And that was probably some of the main reasons we brought in the fraction support, because you went in there not to give advice, but to actually do the work. And that's kind of held fire over the number of years, but the business have picked up to say, without a sales team, without actually going out and selling myself, the work has come to me because of the recommendations, people hearing what we can do and the need for it, and probably the need for people taking responsibility and take some pride in what they do to deliver, and getting kind of a sense of a feeling when they do deliver, but also not worrying whether it's, and kind of having this feeling that you want it to deliver, because a lot of startups now can sense if a consultant is just there for the money now, or just there to make ends meet, they're there to help me get to market. And I think that's one of the reasons why when I talk to a number of startups, that's why we end up getting the work, because we know we're passionate about what we do and how we deliver.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I think, to your point with the investor piece, the investors want fractional team members that they can sub in and kind of sub out depending on what the needs are of the startup company. And that elongates the fundraise, right? Your burn rate, right? It lowers the capital burn rate. You can do more with less. And that's a really important stage for most startups.
Yeah.
Until they're commercializing and really selling the product, you should try to remain as lean as possible for as long as possible. And that's where the rubber is going to hit the road anyways, is can you actually prove there's a clinical need for this? So, getting through all those stages is no easy task. And then it's like, okay, you have your early adopters who have said they're going to use it. They're really excited about it, but you're going to need a team to convince the laggers to get through that valley of death there, right? And really get to the next stage. And so I love what you were saying there. I want to ask about, so the Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium is a client of Project Medtech. We work with them since the Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium came to Columbus, Ohio. So it's a grant that was won by the FDA from Nationwide, Ohio State, Cincinnati Children's, and Cleveland Clinic Children's. So we've been doing a lot of work with them. Obviously, you have came to, or you have been to our events. So you've been to the pediatric device showcase that they have every year. There's one coming up this year at Cincinnati Children's. And it is kind of centering around cardiovascular, heart specifically, for pediatric patients. And it's work that for us has been like very rewarding, right? Because there's not a ton of innovation. It's just centered around pediatrics. I have 2 young kids. And so, it was like a really cool project to kind of to get to work on. But you are going to be playing a bigger role this year. And you also have a personal journey that's been, everything is good now, right? And so, but it's a cool moment where a lot of the work you've done has kind of, you've seen it front and center. So I don't know if you want to share some of that, but
so, well, okay. I've worked with pediatric devices for a number of years, and I know how hard it is to get to market. I've seen a number that's failed and people not want to do it because of the variability in manufacturing, the sizes, the investors. People are just very wary and very risk averse on working with pediatric devices, because obviously there is a massive risk, because they don't want to be associated with something going wrong with a child or a baby. But that's okay. But you need to be able to do that, because if we don't do that, then that's who's going to they're going to suffer in the long run when we can't give them devices. And it probably all kind of ticked off more is when my grandson was born in December. It was an emergency cesarean because he kept going breech, and my daughter was gestational diabetic. They found a small hole in his heart, which they thought was just a valve connecting the mother and the baby together. and it was too big a rattle to be able. So they let him out once the ECG was there. But again, when they were ready to do the ECG, they were using adult pads and potentially about to cut them down. Went back about 6-7 days later, and they got the ultrasound where they then found that the hole hadn't sealed, but bigger issue was that they also had a pinched aorta. So he was kind of taken to emergency surgery the next day, operated on, and was in hospital for like 10, 12 days. And I think just sitting with the nurses during the night, being with the grandson, looking at the devices, how they work, I kind of knew a lot of them weren't kind of developed fully for kids. And some hospitals vary from other areas. But when you talking to the nurses and the doctors and the surgeons, I think it was something that we have to be able to look at and give them the tools to be able to do the job properly. Because the surgeon operated on my grandson's, he could probably be a linebacker for the 49ers. He was 6'4", hands the size of shovels in your Latin, but he worked miracles on the baby. But I think these guys are working miracles, so we have to be able to give them the tools properly. And that's probably one of the things, sitting at night shift, taking time watching the baby, was saying that, how do I give back? I'm fairly comfortable in life. I've loved doing regulatory. I've got some other businesses, but saying, how do we give back to help these clinicians, startups, early stage companies get to market, or even at least make a decision and whether it's worth taking to market, or whether there's an idea, or just being there as a sounding block. So following the same tradition as my Guinness, it was linked to another Guinness post, is you go back through the history of Guinness, and when they gave back to the community once they got to a certain level, and they started looking after the workers, looking after the kind of the people within Dublin and further afield. So I've put out there that I was going to start giving back to these innovators, these kind of clinicians. Got involved with a number of pediatric societies, both in the UK and the US. And I'm probably speaking to about 4 or 5 pediatric companies who, some of them get regulatory people, and I'm just acting as a sounding block for that regulatory person. Somebody there that's not going to just they take their money and tell them they're wrong. Just give them an answer. Yes, I agree with you. No, but we can maybe do this. And a number who have just needed some help just to get to understanding where they are in the regulatory path. They don't have any money, but they've got ideas as part of their PhD, as part of a kind of, they've all got, and what I'm actually finding is a lot of them have got their own story behind it, but not actually telling it. And that's probably the worst thing to do. They have to tell the story, why they set up that company. And there's a number doing it because of what's happened with my grandson. And as I say, that it's going along to Cincinnati, it's obviously cardiovascular heart, and it kind of resonates with obviously my grandson with the heart problems. And it's just been there because I've got, as I said, probably as I introduced myself, I know what it takes to run a medical device company because I've got my own startup company, but I've also got the idea of clinical quality regulatory, and the key bit is the same right through my whole career. I've been there willing to make decisions for them and help them make it. And that's kind of where I'm putting it out there, help them early stage companies to be able to actually, or even as they say, they've got an idea, what does this look like, and help them actually understand what they're going to take to market, help them understand what the FDA are thinking, go help them speak to the FDA. So I think it's just that giving back to where a point where the company's in an even keel where they can then go out and get a consultant, or they can take it forward themselves. Just be there as an advisor, kind of sounding block. But and as I say, I think so far, as I say, I've probably got 7 or 8 companies, a couple of the kind of consortiums across the US I've been talking to, and it's just there just to give people advice. It's actually quite fulfilling when you hear people just needing when you talk to them, they're so grateful of the advice because they just don't know where to turn at times because they don't have a lot of money, or they don't have any money, but they've got a great idea, and it's all linked to pediatric devices. And that's one of the things that is probably kind of making it worthwhile, is when you see that and you see people actually feeling that you're giving them answers and you're giving them a kind of hope. Sometimes they didn't maybe like the answer, but they know why. I've actually told them why, that it's maybe need to look at something different. And it's that thing that's kind of spurring us on. And that's where I think, as I say, I've got along to this event in Cincinnati, which I think is kind of, these events are something else because they have to be out there. We have to we can't have children being an afterthought.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, to your point, there's a number of these pediatric device consortiums throughout the U.S. It's a nice program from the FDA to really focus on, devices for our smallest patients. And I think it's also a potential area that is overlooked quite a bit. Like I think when you think about, and I'm oversimplifying this, but when you think about drug development, right? You can develop a drug for an adult and then just reduce the dosage, right? For
Yeah.
kids. For devices, you can't do that,
No.
right? If you develop a catheter for an adult, you got to make it a lot smaller for a pediatric patient, right? And if you think about, like, I know there's some companies that we're working with that are in the pediatric space where they're looking at, can they use materials that can stretch 300% of their original size, right? So you can grow with patients as well, because that's the other thing that people don't think about. Actually, I was having a conversation with one of my neighbors who her husband is a surgeon who spends most of his time in Africa training other surgeons. He's a pediatric surgeon though, so that's his kind of focus. And that's the one thing that you really don't think about is, hey, even if you put something in a patient that is a year old, you probably have to go back and redo that in another year and another year. And so, those are some of the really exciting innovations is, how do you reduce the economic burdens and clinical burden on a family and a patient that says, this is my 8th time going into surgery and they're 6 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a really, really important space. And I think some of the hardest things is just, where does innovation happen? Who does the innovation? And who funds the innovation?
Yeah.
There's definitely some angel groups, family offices, venture funds out there that focus on the pediatric space, but not nearly enough.
Yeah.
So it'll be great to have you at that event, which will be May 15th. And this podcast will definitely be released by then. Yeah.
Following on from that, Dwayne, I think even when I put it out there and I've started to talk to people in the industry who I've known for years, and a lot of them have got similar stories where in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when obviously devices weren't as innovative as they are now, the technology wasn't the same. Like they maybe have had the same issues, maybe a child's died. But these people have came forward to myself, both here in the UK and in the US and further afield, who it is quite heartwarming that people are coming out now and saying, look, if you're going to be doing this and helping, if they need help, like I've spoken to a number of test houses, a number of kind of investors that we said, like kind of business development people who are looking at business plans, etc. A number of people have reached out to me, and even as I say, even the test houses have said, look, if we've got a pediatric device that it needs testing, we can potentially look at how do we help you. Obviously, we can't give you it all for free, but we can look at how do we reduce the cost. Could it be just materials that we use, and we kind of, as long as it is pediatric and it's coming through yourself or there's something there that is, so that's like a kind of it's like, and this shows you how well the whole medtech community can pull together. When you put that one post out, the kind of replies was unbelievable, but also the personal replies with people volunteering to help if it gets too much, if there are too many companies, other regulated people who you would say is that are competitors to me, but we're not really, but because I've had a couple of discussions with some great regulated people who want to come in and help where we can, but so it's like a small consortium of regulatory people who all have got the same mindset as myself. We were at clinical as well. Like, how do we make this decision? How do we help this company go forward from our experience, reduce the cost? Because we can't reduce everything, but we can help the whole process with them. And I think that's kind of the whole pediatric consortiums across the US is great. And I think the people who put their time and effort into it is unbelievable. But I think we can also, how do we make it easier and from a more straightforward, reduce the cost where we can to get these products to market? And as I say, as we can, if I see people coming together that they're offering, that's something that's going to help companies, because I always hear people saying, well, it's the same rules whether it's adult or pediatric. So what's the problem? And I'm like, that's not the problem. That's the regulations are straightforward. We can go talk to the FDA. We can get discussions with them, but it's the cost and the variability. And as I say, the kind of value return to companies. You don't get a big value return to companies. They don't sell a lot of pediatric devices, which is a good thing, because that means there's not too many children that are sick. But and they go for the adults, because that's where business obviously has to operate and make a profit. But I think we have to look at it is, how do we make it easier to get these pediatric devices to market, but still have the quality and efficacy that we know that it works. And I think that's where it will take some time, but with the kind of discussions I'm having at various events and the offline, some of them are really, really promising, where people are actually volunteering to support us. So that's something that I'm probably thinking about. How do I take this forward with regards to LinkedIn post, a LinkedIn page about pediatric support, where nobody goes on to sell their services. They're there just to help people come to us. I've got probably a couple of design companies, manufacturing companies that I've worked with for years. All says we could give them a couple of hours, maybe a half a day consultancy, just to help them if they're struggling. And all that helps. That small bit where, if it reduces stress on the innovator, that allows them to make a decision, so this is not going to eventually happen. They can kill it without spending years trying to develop it and nothing happens, spending money looking at grants. Or it could help them actually get a grant, take it forward, because there's lots of grants out there that people can get money for. And if they can go and present to the grant people that they've already spoken to regulatory, clinical reimbursement, or they've got some advice and they've got some information that they can present to them, it actually will probably potentially help them go forward and get that funding to take it forward.
Mm-hmm. I love that. All right, let me. This has been great. Let me pivot. We'll follow up the pediatric discussion with a discussion about Guinness. So the first time you do a Guinness post and you relate it to regulatory and quality, because that is like what all of the posts have been, and I love all of them. Is there an endless supply? How much longer can you go on?
I can go on forever
doing these.
Oh, as long as we're allowed to drink Guinness. I think one of the things I thought back was, everybody's got their own kind of. I never really used LinkedIn that much. I use it now because I think it's a way of putting out there and trying to help startups. So what I think people were getting fed up with regulatory. When I was sitting at events and people were saying, "Oh, they've posted again," all they're doing is telling us what the regulations are. So I was sitting there, and you've got yourself with your podcast. Everybody's got their own kind of way of putting themselves out there. Like, I think at LSI, there was myself, there was the Medtech guru Etienne, and there was the Medtech man Justin, and somebody walked past them, and there's the Guinness man as well. So what are they trying to put the world to rights? And I think that's when I go back to when I first done the Guinness post, and how I kind of related it to regulatory quality startups, and like what even down to the simple bit of the Guinness pour, the 119 seconds, how you pour it properly, if you don't get it right, etc., etc. So I think there's probably a lot more to go in that. As I say, that it normally happens when I'm traveling. That's probably all the time just now. But I think people actually, the feedback I get and people talking about it is the Guinness posts that they're looking for them. They're looking to see what I'm talking about this time. So I'm really going to have to keep it going, keep reinventing the wheel. But from a medical device point of view, there's endless opportunities for that. And as they say, Guinness is not going to run out. So I'm going to have to keep going with the different ideas of how do you relate regulatory clinical startups to Guinness. And even if you go back, and if people watch the Guinness series on Netflix, you'll see that most of it is true. It goes back to how they built the business, how they developed it and moved it forward, and how it even came into the US, and it's that type of thing. Is how do you relate to Guinness quality, because it's a quality product. I couldn't get sponsored off them, but that's maybe another day. But But I think a lot of these Guinness posts are going to stop. As I say, too many people are looking for them. Too many people actually, it actually is a great introduction when you're at events, because most people will look for you and say, right, let's have a Guinness. And that actually, like most events, people are actually saying, right, I'll meet you in the bar for some Guinness. Okay. And it actually helps the conversation, the networking, and it actually gets you talking, because we can then talk about whatever we want after that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's great, and I think it's a, I think that is a big thing, right? Is uh, for me, the podcast was new, especially like as a scientist, talking to a bunch of people was a little weird at first, but I thought it was a really interesting way to give back to the community, right?
Yeah.
Because you can engage with it and talk and learn something from every individual that's ever been on the podcast. And then I think, the other piece about LinkedIn is that's totally right, is that, you never know when someone's going to read a post and go, oh, that really resonates with me, right? I can take that and use that in the future. And it's actually, that is what I do. I have a little note section on my phone, and when I see people's LinkedIn posts, and I'm like, oh wow, that resonates with me, I'll copy and paste it and move it over. Or when I talk to a guest on the podcast and they say something, I'll sit there and kind of type that out and say, wow, that's a really good thing. And then you build this out, and it does help you see the world in a little different way. And so it's really interesting. I will say, just again, we're gonna be together a few times this year, but we do get to go to Ireland
Yes.
together later this year in Galway. And prior to COVID, I had been to Ireland 5 times, 4 times for work, and once for a holiday with my wife. And I am so excited to get back there, but also to have a Guinness in Ireland, which will be nice. And so for anyone who's going to be there with us, so just bow out when you need to, because if you keep going, your night will end poorly if you're trying to keep up with Edwin. You know a lot about regulatory and quality. I understand that's your bread and butter, but you also know a lot about the US market and European companies trying to come to the US market. And so if you had your best piece of advice for a company that is not familiar with the US market, that's looking to take their product that's been successful in another market to the US market, what's the one thing they need to know to be successful?
Get the right advice. I would say, the number of companies that I've worked with, the one advice is get the right advice, get the right network, get people who have got a trusted network, not just who wants to make money. Everybody wants to make money. I think it's to be does the people you're working with have a network? Because not everybody can do it themselves. It's that trusted network that these people have that allow you to come to the US to support you. So it's like myself, where I've built up a completely network working with your project Medtech, with reimbursement and other aspects, like Mike Camise with insurance. I've got a number of lawyers and bookkeepers. I've got RAF Solutions with logistics and warehousing. So what we've started to add it together. It's getting that network of trust of people to get to the market who have been there, done it, but also know the understanding of the startup game, that they understand how startups work, and how they're coming to the US is not easy. It's the biggest market in the world, but it's not easy to actually break into. But you need the support and a trusted network that you can fall back on to ask questions, whether it's investors, entrepreneurs. And you get, like the events that you put on, Dwayne, that's where we meet them all, where I've started to meet all these and build this kind of trusted network of people who I can then bring in and just introduce to clients and say, look, talk to them. I've got my own medical device company in the US as well, where I've used that network to get to a stage where we raised 1.5 million. We then started to use our network across the US to then start to sell into hospitals, get to know key opinion leaders, and start to make progress. So it's not just from a quality regulatory, it's like reimbursement, insurance, distribution, logistics, banking, everything. You need that trusted network. People start, when you get to that network, then that's when you know that you're getting introduced to people who you can trust.
I love it. Awesome. So, Edwin, because we did have connectivity issues, we're able to do something pretty cool. We have a special guest that you talked about
Yes,
earlier in the episode, your grandson, who is going to make a guest appearance here on
he's
the
coming.
podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah. This is a first right here.
yes.
So grandson is how old now?
6 months. So he had his surgery
6 months.
in like after 10 days, but he's now 6 months.
Uh-huh.
And that's one of the reasons why I said I give back, because so I spent, as I said earlier on, 12, 14 nights with him in the hospital, and you can see that happens with the pediatric devices. And as I say, he's
Yeah.
growing stronger and stronger. And I say, if it wasn't for helping the surgeons, this is probably one of the reasons
Yeah.
why I'm doing what I'm doing as well. And yeah,
That's it.
and I get home now and again to see him, but yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can say hello
It's
to everybody on LinkedIn that it's following you. You know what is know what's happened with you. You can see you're doing well.
That's right. Yeah. He's I know for us, I mean, me and you were texting about everything, and this is why we do what we do right here.
Yes,
There's
no,
there's good proof of it right there.
no,
Yeah.
definitely. That's to say that's why we give back, why we do it. So say you can see the benefits of what we do, and you can
Yeah.
see how things can go. If we didn't do that, then we wouldn't be able to. He might not have been sitting here on this podcast with us, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
and I might not be able to take him when he's older for his first Guinness.
Listen, he can probably take down more Guinness as he sits right now, more than half the listeners on the podcast. So yeah,
Yes,
it's in his
probably.
system.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, awesome.
And
And
it's,
what's it?
I always say Guinness is good for you.
That's right. That's right. I'm not going to argue about that.
Yeah,
Awesome. Edwin, thanks so much for doing this. Hang on for a minute. We'll chat offline.
yeah, no problem.
It was good to see you and your grandson.
No problem. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Freddie Coffey, Director of Marketing at Jumpstart. The Project Medtech podcast is proudly sponsored by Jumpstart Inc. Jumpstart's Trailblazer Accelerator helps Ohio's most innovative early-stage health tech startups fast-track their growth with tailored advising from serial entrepreneurs, non-dilutive funding to fuel their journey, and unrivaled access to a network of experts, resources, and investment opportunities. Whether it's improving patient outcomes, advancing digital health, or reimagining care delivery, Jumpstart provides the high-impact services and critical resources to bring big ideas to life. Learn more at jumpstartinc.org/startups.
Thank you for listening. At our core, we at Project Medtech are networkers, educators, and consultants. We meet you where you are to bring value and to create impact. We care deeply about helping medtech companies succeed right from the start, through to exit by providing consulting and fractional services, hosting impactful industry events, and of course, sharing incredible guest insights like the ones you heard today through our podcast. Please reach out at any time if we can be of assistance. Check out our website at www.projectmedtech.com or email us at info@projectmedtech.com.